Thank you for inviting me to be part of Goafest today. It's quite an honour. And thank you, Debda, for such an interesting presentation. And if you ever come to Amsterdam to our agency for a breakfast meeting, you're liable to sit there at the table. We have this table with croissants sitting on the table. And we all have we have a pile of croissants and we discuss the meeting. And about 18 months ago, I was sitting in a meeting with some clients and we had a fantastic meeting. It went really well, really interesting meeting. And at the end of the meeting, the clients left and our head of catering, Terry, came up to me and said, what happened? I said, well, it was a very good meeting. What do you mean? He said, no one ate the croissants. I thought, this is strange. Terry's very worried about the croissants. The work went well, so let's not worry. Anyway, the following week, we have another breakfast meeting with a different client. The croissants are sitting there on the table. The meeting goes very well, very interesting, inspirational meeting. Terry comes up to me at the end. He says, look, no one's eating the croissants. The second week. Again, the third week, the same thing happens again. The croissants are sitting there on the table, and no one eats them. Our clients didn't want to eat our croissants. Now, we may think this is not important, but actually, we're people who like to solve problems. So it is important to us, and we want to understand why. So we tried to find the solution. We looked for better croissants. Terry went across town. He found these very fresher, bigger croissants. We put them on the table, client meeting. No one touched them. The meeting went well, by the way. But no one touched them. So some of the best minds in the agency got together and we diversified our offering. Like any good marketeers, we brought in the pain au chocolat, the apricot swirl, even the Danish pastry on the table. We sat there proudly, we had the work going, the breakfast meeting. We knew we had solved it. We had the meeting. No one touched our amazing array of pastries. We were stumped. So we did what any great marketeer would do. We enhanced the look and feel. We bought some plates, like stands with bows on. We put them on the table. They were piled up with these pastries. Disaster. We barely had room for the table. It was a disaster. The meeting went well, by the way. Again, the business was going well, but the pastries were a disaster. Our clients still didn't want to eat. What could be the problem? One day, an intern walked into the room just before we were going to have our breakfast meeting, and he walked in with a knife. And he did this. He cut our croissants in half. I said, what are you doing? These amazing croissants that no one ever wants to eat. Why are you cutting them in half? He said, they won't fit on this plate. They're so big. And do you know what happened? It changed everything. Our clients were eating half croissants. They were eating 2 or 3 croissants without realizing it because they were only eating half a croissant at a time. And actually, the realization was we didn't need a better croissant. We didn't need a kind of sweeter croissant, a more delicate croissant. It was actually we just needed a smaller croissant because actually no one really wanted to look like a pig eating a giant piece of pastry. And our clients have never stopped eating since. But it tells us this. If you tackle a problem in the obvious way, you're never going to solve it. Because it's not the problem, It's the perspective and the way you look at the problem that is going to help you solve it. So, the answer to this conundrum, to our pastry conundrum, was actually staring us right in the face. A lot of people say this, it was staring us right in the face, but actually it was staring us right in the face. It was on the wall of our agency. This is a picture of our agency, and here on the wall is a quote. And it says, "Whenever you get into trouble, keep going. Do a 180-degree turn. Turn the situation halfway around. Don't look for the secure solution. Don't pull back from the passion. Turn it on full force." The agency was named after this quote. The founders of the agency saw this quote in a magazine and they thought, this is so provocative and interesting, we want to be this. It was said by Francis Ford Coppola, the film director, whilst he was directing his masterpiece, Apocalypse Now. Now, Apocalypse Now was a very difficult movie to make. And Coppola had many, many problems while he was making the movie. And he turned these problems and he turned them, he faced any problem and turned it on full force. He had a typhoon that hit the set while he was shooting and destroyed everything. His lead actor, Martin Sheen, woke up one day with what he thought was indigestion. He got out of bed, he crawled out of his room, he crawled to the road near his hotel, got on a local bus, got to hospital. They found out he had a heart attack in the middle of filming. And Marlon Brando, who had taken a $1 million advance to be in the movie, turned up. He hadn't learned his lines. In fact, he hadn't even read the script. He didn't even know why he was there. But Coppola ignored all this. He used it. He embraced the apocalypse. Now, Joseph Conrad, who wrote The Heart of Darkness, the book that Apocalypse Now was originally based on, wrote this: facing it, always facing it. That's the way to get through. And I think this was good advice for Coppola because he didn't fear being in the middle of the horror. In fact, the horror fueled his creativity. And this is something that we find is really important to us. We need fuel for our creativity. And here's an excerpt from the Cannes Film Festival in the early 70s, where Coppola is talking about how he shot and how he filmed Apocalypse Now. He jumped straight in. He created Vietnam on a movie set. And he let his lead actors believe they were in Vietnam. They actually shot it in the Philippines, and they were there for a very long time. And this is what, he jumped straight in. He became what he was filming. And I think this is what we need to do. We need to do as an industry. We need to jump straight in. A competitive review is not passion full force, a kind of competitive review delivered on someone's desk at 6 p.m. on a Friday. No. I've worked on PlayStation for many years in my career. And whenever I work on PlayStation, I immerse myself in the game. I end up with calluses on my thumbs, rings around my eyes, and my wife is always really, really angry with me because I'm sitting there immersing myself in PlayStation. We just launched PlayStation 4 around the world, which has outsold Xbox in many territories 3-1. But we only did this by really understanding what we were doing. I've also I've been fortunate enough to work on some of the world's leading sports brands. When I was at Wieden & Kennedy, I worked on Nike, and I ran 7 marathons during that time. I worked on Adidas, and I now work on ASICS. And we really believe that the best sports brands, you have to turn the passion on full force, and you have to immerse yourself in the story. And so when we work on ASICS, we actually have meetings with our clients where we go running together. And then we have research groups where we go running with the research groups all over the world. So our researchers will go and they'll have a research group where they will talk to people during their run. And we found out that when we were working on ASICS, and we discovered that when we were relaunching the brand, that actually running isn't a solitary sport as you would imagine it. And this was only by throwing ourselves into it and really kind of getting under the skin of it. But actually, running is a collective sport and full of tribes and full of people coming together. And we managed to, by understanding this, we have just relaunched the ASICS brand with this TV commercial that we created. But also, what we've done is we've given runners a sense of the tribe that they are connected to, and the world that they inhabit is actually full of other runners. And we've had a very, very positive response to this work so far. That's passion. That comes from really being at the heart of what you want to do, of what you want to tell, the story you want to tell, throwing yourself into it. But also, passion isn't enough unless you have a fresh perspective. And how do you get this fresh perspective? By changing your perspective, you mean to have a bigger ambition. So what we created with that piece of work is that we wanted to lift it out of the solitary runner, and we wanted to make it a bigger ambition, something that people could say, this is bigger than running. This is about the world. And in that way, we can find a bigger solution. So let's get back to the jungle, because Coppola has something very interesting to tell us on this subject. So the story goes that he's been shooting in the Philippines now. He's been shooting Apocalypse Now for 100 shoot days. I think that's probably about 40 commercials, if you can imagine it in that terms. And the United Artists, the production company who are supporting the film, are very worried about their investment. In fact, they think Francis Ford Coppola, the director, has gone insane. And so they send in John Milius, the writer, the screenwriter who originally wrote the screenplay, and they send him in to go and talk sense to Coppola. And they say, you've got to go in there, talk sense to the man, he's gone mad. He wanted to create a movie that would end all war, that would win a Nobel Prize. A very noble kind of way of looking at movie making. And you know, if we actually think about our own business in those terms, if we can go out and try and win a Nobel Prize with the work that we're doing, then maybe we can win a Goafest along the way. Wouldn't that be fantastic? So let me step out of the world of filmmaking and advertising for a second, and marketing. And let's have a look at reframing issues to find better solutions and change what we're all here to do. We're all here to kind of change human behavior in some way. So my first example is from a think tank in London. And they were given this problem. People lie. People lie on forms that they fill in, on mortgage forms and insurance forms. They fill in the form, they get to the bottom, and they don't exactly lie, but they bend the truth, and they kind of exaggerate and all things like that. So how do we get people to tell the truth when they're filling in forms? Well, we look for somewhere where the truth is really important and where people are afraid of lying. And in the courtroom, people are afraid of lying. But they make an oath in the courtroom at the beginning of their statement. But weirdly, with a form, we make it at the end, the oath at the end. We sign and we make our declaration after we give our information. It doesn't make sense. So this very clever think tank in London said, what if we signed the form at the top and we make our oath before we give the information? I think it's quite a smart thing. I would say we should adopt this worldwide and stop all this insurance fraud and mortgage fraud. Another big problem. This is an even bigger problem. Men are animals. And this is true. This is a wall that says, please do not urinate here. I'm in the communications industry, and I know this won't work. People won't listen because men behave in a way, often when inebriated, in a way that they probably wouldn't want to behave. And they certainly won't want people to see them behave. In fact, men urinate against walls when it suits them, normally now down dark alleyways late at night. So how can we solve this? How can we stop this very basic human behavior? Well, there was a hotel in Italy who came up with a very, very clever idea. They created this sign. What if we make them infamous? We film them. We put them on YouTube. We shame them. A great lateral solution from a hotel owner in Italy. We know that this can change human behavior, and it was very successful, apparently. But it's hard to shift perspective when everyone feels safe with the obvious. You know, going back to the world of marketing now, you know, many CMOs, many marketing directors are only in their jobs for a short period of time. They don't want to be the person who kind of upsets the apple cart by suddenly taking a new perspective and creating change. But that's exactly what they need to do. Because we need brands who are facing apocalypse. Because all brands really are. Because the world is changing so rapidly. So, if you think about it, the world's probably one of the world's most successful brands was facing an apocalypse. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple in 1999 after a decade away from the business, they were 90 days away from bankruptcy. Jobs sat down with Lee Clow from Chiat Day, and they came up with the Think Different campaign. They didn't have any product. The whole company was in a mess. There was too many products, too much development, all going in the wrong direction. But he came up with a philosophy that the company could adhere to in the style of a marketing campaign, a thinking different, and actually gave them a positioning that they were for the people who thought differently about the world, very much like Jobs himself. And they only had 2% of the world's computer market at the time, so it really was a case of thinking different if you bought an Apple. So that was a brand that was in an apocalypse that needed a fresh perspective. But it's not always the biggest companies who are facing the biggest problems. So we have, 180 Amsterdam is really set up to take brands global or multi-market. Almost all our clients are global clients. But once in a while, we work on a very small brands who we want to make famous and do something that's really provocative for them to kind of get the world to sit up and take notice. And we've just started working with a coffee brand called Moseley. And they're a Dutch coffee brand. And they're very kind of radical people. They have this very radical stance. And Amsterdam's a very liberal, the Netherlands is a very liberal place. So we thought this was interesting. We'll take this radical coffee brand and the liberal attitude of Amsterdam, and we'll create a taste test with a difference. We believe that everybody should embrace their own apocalypse and the jungle they are living in. We had this thing that we say in the agency, said, you've got to throw yourself into it and actually embrace all the problems that we have thrown at us. Don't shy away. And that's why Coppola is an inspiration to us and should be for everyone, because he used all the chaos and problems that he had when he was making this movie and made it into an enormous creative energy and ended up being celebrated globally for his achievement. So we say, jump into any problem with passion and turn it on full force. Don't ever look for the secure solution. Do something that scares you. Make sure you feel uncomfortable with what you're doing. And then you'll be creating something new, something fresh, and something interesting. And so remember this, whenever you get into trouble, keep going, do a 180-degree turn. Turn the situation halfway around. Don't look for the secure solution. Don't pull back from the passion. Turn it on full force. Now, people come from all over the world to work at 180, in both our offices in Amsterdam and LA. And they've seen this quote. And you know, our clients have seen this quote. And we founded the agency on this. And so we decided to send a team to San Francisco to try and track down Francis Ford Coppola and see what he had to say about these immortal words that we have invested 17 years of our lives in. So if I had to leave you with some, just a closing thought, is that really is, use the apocalypse to create energy. Don't look for the secure solution. And at client meetings, always cut the pastries in half. Thank you.
Start off, and that was a very, very trippy, marijuana kind of a thing. Absolutely apt, I think. My first question would be that, is there an actual process? Or do you set up jungles and when you get a client brief?
We actually have a process which is all about simplification. We want to create, one of the most important parts of the process for us is that we understand where a client is and where they are and where they want to go. We call it the to and from. It's really that simple. So when we create the ambition, where we want to take them to, and wherever they are, that's the tension we have to create. That's the story we have to create. And understanding that ambition is the single most important thing.
So is there like a toolkit or a specific kind of thing that one can use? Like, client comes, tells you the things, and then what do you do?
Well, the client, every client's slightly different with us because of the nature of our clients. Sometimes they have very big, difficult problems. Sometimes they have very simple. Sometimes they have an internal market of many countries they have to sell to. But really what we have to do is we sit with them, we collaborate with them. Collaboration is really, really important. And then we understand what their business objective is. And I know that sounds really obvious and really simple, but then...
I was expecting jungles and like...
But then we've got to hack away. Let me go along with the metaphor then. We hack away the nonsense and the jungle. We get to Colonel Kurtz's cabin at the end of the river, and that's where we find our final ambition is going to be. It's actually, we try and find that ambition for the client, and then we try and turn it up a notch as well. A lot of the clients get very scared during the process because they're like, this is getting out of control.
So they're part of the process, your thinking process.
Clients are always part of the process. I always think that I don't know how agencies exist if the client isn't part of the process. So we're always trying to bring them along, make them part of it, so they're culpable as well. It's very important.
Okay. You have also, I would be, imagine a lot of us would be interested, you have had a very success rate at pitches, and you have won a lot of businesses.
Yes.
Including some very, very famous global ones.
Yeah.
Is there a method there?
A method for winning business? You know what? I think there is.
Can you?
Do you want me to tell you? I think the thing about winning business is that you have to really be honest with yourself. A lot of agencies do run, and I've been party to this in the past when we haven't won. We've analysed why we haven't won. And there's a delusion within a group of people when you're going towards something very quickly. You think you found the solution, but there's actually, the solution isn't really quite right. But you all believe in it so much that you run to it. So we often have a point where we say, stop. Let's kind of burst the bubble And let's be really, really honest with ourselves about what we're doing here. And you know it in yourself when you actually step out of the process. You go, hold on a second, what we thought was really great probably isn't. And what we try and do is get to that before a pitch day. Because sometimes if you don't do that before the pitch day, it happens in the pitch room. And that's the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah. So we have a question here. Influenced by the philosophy of 180 Amsterdam, what advice would you like to give to planners? How do they make happen great work?
And I think that's a really interesting question, because really planning is the bedrock of great creative work. And you know, what I've really just been talking about today is a planning conversation. Creative kind of falls out of great planning. I believe creatives should be involved in the planning part. I don't think planners should go away, sit in a room, and then write a brief and come back and go, da-da, here we are, this is what you should be working on. I really think that actually creatives need to be part of the planning process, but then the planning should take the big shift. The big lateral leap should happen and from the insight, and that should happen from at the brief stage. But everybody is responsible for that process, and everybody understands it, and that includes account management as well. When we have a group of people working on a brief, we don't just have the planner and the creatives. Account management are equally responsible for making sure that the work has that leap, that lateral leap.
You start out all together.
We have a huddle. A bit like a sports team, you know, you bring in and everybody's responsible. It doesn't matter what position you're playing, you're all responsible.
Wonderful. This is something a bit from your past. There was a kind of Coca-Cola work.
Yeah, Coca-Cola, yeah.
Then there was Happiness Factory.
Yeah.
How did you do that? What happened? How did you sell it? I mean,
Happiness Factory was almost never got made. It was one of those things. We won the global when I was at Wyden and Kennedy, we won the global Coca-Cola pitch, and we thought this is fantastic, and we went into kind of pre-production with all of the work, and then the clients decided that they didn't like a lot of the way we were taking the work, and they probably had quite a valid point. We were in that bubble at the time that I was talking about. And they said, we want to come over and talk to you because we were quite unhappy about things. We'd only had the business 3 weeks. It would have been an absolute disaster. And they came and talked to me, and we literally had worked all night to come up with some solutions. And they said, these are good. Yeah, these are good. They might work. We'd like to meet you in Paris in a week's time to see if you can really kind of hone this down. So we worked on it for another week. I had an 8 a.m. meeting with the clients in Paris, and this was a do-or-die meeting. They were about to be fired off the business after having it for 4 weeks. And we came up with some rough scamps and some ideas that actually sounded kind of quite ludicrous and mad. When you look at them, you go, Coca-Cola bottles with flying, you know, strange animals with kind of carrying them around. And I looked at it at 6 a.m. in the morning when I was in Paris, and I said, this is what we need to be doing. If we don't do this, we're not going to be able to create the change that is needed and the reevaluation that is needed. So I had these rough scamps. I went in to see the client at 8 a.m. in the morning, thinking, if we don't get this right, they're going to kick me out of the room. And they said, yeah, we'll back it. We won't research it. Just go and make it now. You've cracked it. So it was a case of pricking that delusion, thinking about what was needed, and then being brave and going forward and trying to do something that was really fresh.
I always thought you might have, dreamt it up in Amsterdam in one of the seat joints because it was so trippy. I mean,
it was very, yeah. And, a lot of ideas feel trippy when you first hear them, don't they? But then they become the norm. Yes. It's one of these things. In fact, most ideas most of the best ideas actually feel insane when you first hear them. But then you go, oh yeah, after you live with it for a while, you go, yeah, it's fantastic.
So one last thing for you. I just got this one which says, I have to finish this, but I read somewhere that you have listed Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh as one of your top 10 favorite places to go to.
Yeah.
And you have worked with Sunidhi Chauhan on Western Union is part of the singing telegram thing. So is there an interesting India connection?
The reason why I'm here is I think India is fantastic, because I think India, we know, and I tell you, I believe that India is going like that. I believe that India is booming. I may be naive, but I actually think it is, and I think it's going to be. I think the world is looking at India at the moment, and I'm really excited about that. I think you have a new government. I think there's a tech industry here. There's loads of brands. Indians have revived the British car industry. You know, there's all over the world we see the power of India in our everyday lives. So I really think that it's a very, very interesting place to be, economically, spiritually, and creatively. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and I would love us to be in India more and for longer in the future. But we have no concrete plans yet, but you never know.